Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, and we're talking about some underused Pokemon today. To meet this criteria here of the six I selected here, they had to be under 10% usage and had to have been doing well in events in the past couple weekends. All of these Pokemon are very, very cool and very, very strong in their own unique ways. And for the case of some of them, we talked about them way before Scarlet and Violet was ever even released. And I'm excited to touch up on them again and explore what they've been doing in the game. But before we get into all that, make sure to do all that fun YouTube stuff for us. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. It helps us out a lot. If you're interested in playing any kind of best of 3, whether that be just like casual with our dojo or looking at maybe a longer term plan with the circuit coming up in January, make sure to check the description down below for our Discord link. All of our information will be over there, and that's kind of where we're going to handle things moving forward. So when I went and gathered all this data on all these underused Pokemon, King Gambit was sitting at 9%. I believe after this weekend, King Gambit has officially jumped up to above that 10% benchmark. So King Gambit is kind of like the honorable mention of underused Pokemon. King Gambit has multiple different sets you can play. I know people have been playing Assault Vest mainly with Defiant, like Kowtow Cleave, Sucker Punch, Iron Head, and Brick Break, kind of just like double dark coverage, steel coverage, and then fighting type for the King Gambit mirror in case you don't Terra. Terra types have been varying all over the place for this Pokemon. I've seen water, dark, steel, fairy, fire, you name it, it's probably been used for King Gambit. Dark Steel is one of those cool typings where you're really only weak to 4 times to fighting, and you're also weak to like ground and fire. And so people have been like Terra Water or Terra Fire to dodge some of those. I know Joyu X9 used a very cool like weakness policy set with Terra Fire as its option. And I think this is something that's really underexplored in terms of like certain Pokemon that have access to being good with weakness policy. King Gambit naturally is very, very slow, but you have access to priority Sucker Punch. So if your weakness policy gets procced on turn 1 or 2 or whatever, you can then click Sucker Punch to utilize it before your opponent can take you out. On top of that, you have the ability Supreme Overlord, which raises your attack and special attack by 10% for, I believe, every ally fainted. Yes. And the way that works is with that kind of team, you could still run this policy with like Fire or Assault Vest, and maybe in like a Trick Room style team, you can just have King Gambit be your sweeper. Essentially, once your Trick Room setters go down your first 2 Pokemon, you just send out King Gambit, who now gets a 20% boost to its damage, and then you activate the policy, and you just kind of snowball the game out of control. Speaking of decent Trick Room Pokemon, we also have Skeledirge on our list here. Skeledirge has kind of risen in the ranks as one of the good Dondozo counters, having the ability Unaware and Terra Grass at your disposal. You kind of just get to sit in front of these big Dondozos and stall them out, essentially. Between Leftovers and Slack Off, you have so much recovery that the Dondozo can't really ever two-shot you outside of like crit to crit back to back. Beyond that, you are a really good Pokemon in general, just in terms of damage, because you have access to your signature move, Torch Song, which essentially allows you to snowball into this +2 or +3 special attack Skeledirge, and then you're one-shotting things. As for your last damaging move, sometimes it's Terra Blast if you really need that coverage. Most of the time it's Shadow Ball, which I personally prefer in terms of coverage. I think having access to double stab is better than having access to your Terra type most of the time. There's certain situations where that's different, but in terms of Skeledirge, you don't really need the grass coverage. You're not really beating up the water types that way. You're mostly just clicking Torch Song and then hitting them with the neutral Shadow Ball to get your KOs. Keeping on the Trick Room game plan here, we have Gothitelle. Gothitelle has definitely started to see more play as this Pokemon is able to trap people with its Shadow Tag ability. This means that things like if they terrestrialize, they're kind of just stuck in there. If you have some really good pressure, I think like Gothitelle Meowscarlet is really good. Gothitelle plus Tatsugiri we've seen a little bit pop up. And so it lets you outlead your opponent and set up really good, like, 1-2 punches where you can get an early lead and kind of put a lot of pressure on what your opponent's trying to do. Beyond that, this thing is very bulky. Plus, with Terra Dark, you get to dodge all of the weaknesses that you would normally have outside of Bug, but we're not worried about that. You get access to Hypnosis Spam and Fake Out, and a lot of them are starting to run Heal Pulse as a way to kind of outbulk opposing teams. Being a Pokemon without a lot of like actual damaging moves means that you can kind of just be this full support Pokemon and click Heal Pulse or click Hypnosis when necessary, while also just kind of cycling in and out for Fake Outs and Protects. One of the other things Gothitelle does really good at is just being a Trick Room setter. Usually, if we're not playing Protect, we're playing Trick Room in this last slot. And what this does is it kind of lets fast teams have a good interactive Pokemon that also means that they get to add to their bulk and can reverse Trick Room or set Trick Room when necessary. Gothitelle's very good at just being this kind of jack of all trades support, and I expect to see Gothitelle's usage increase as Series 1 kind of develops. Still on the Trick Room hype plan, if you haven't figured out where Series 1 is heading yet, we're talking about Hariyama next. This was like my #1 Pokemon that I thought was going to do really well of the returning like support Pokemon, because Hariyama does so much work in the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl formats that I thought Hariyama was just going to take off regardless of what the gimmick was. It hasn't reached that point yet. It's only, I think, like 5% usage, which compared to where it was probably a couple weeks ago at the start of the format is a very good improvement. But Hariyama still has a long way to go. With the implementation of open team sheets for competitive events, though, I think Hariyama is going to start to see a whole lot more play. Having access to Guts Flame Orb means that you can deal massive damage with your Hariyama and not have to worry about like opposing sleep or paralysis or anything like that. You also get access to things like Bullet Punch, which is really, really good. You have access to the new move Headlong Rush, which is essentially a ground type close combat, which I think that is very, very powerful and will have its own uses later on. Beyond that, you have access to Fake Out and Knock Off for decent utility. Not to mention, if you really want to get somebody, you can always Terra Normal and go Guts Boosted Facade. I think this is probably one of the best ways to pick up KOs on people. Facade essentially will go to a base 140 normal move. You'll get normal Terra Stab, and you'll just run people down with this thing. I think there's a lot to like about Hariyama, not to mention like Wide Guard, Helping Hand, and all the actual support moves it has, but it's going to hit like a truck 95% of the time into whatever's in front of it. Finally, moving away from Trick Room, let's talk about Talonflame. Talonflame is the other priority Tailwind user because we have access to the ability Gale Wings. This gives all of your flying moves +1 priority, and in the case of Tailwind, that puts it on the same par as Murkrow. Bonus points here because Gale Wings gives Brave Bird priority as well, allowing you to move ahead of most Pokemon when it comes to needing to deal damage fast. Talonflame is no slouch with 81 attack and base 126 speed. Brave Birds are going to hit like a truck most of the time. If you're worried about getting interacted with like Fake Out, you have things like Covert Cloak now to kind of just say, haha, sorry, I'm still going to do my thing because I'm still base 126 speed. You also have access to things like Will-O-Wisp, which is really, really good. You could also play special with like Hurricane and Heat Wave. There's a lot that Talonflame can do. Most of what we see with it, though, is when it's on teams, like also with Murkrow, as a secondary Tailwind setter. So the idea is just like, I have Murkrow in my lead, Murkrow goes down, I take out their Murkrow, and now I have my own secondary Tailwind setter for after my Tailwind goes down and my opponent doesn't. This creates a lot of extra pressure and gives you very good ways of controlling the speed of the game, which right now is very, very important. The last Pokemon I want to talk about is Pawmot. This thing is a monster. A monster. It is probably the best Pikachu clone we have ever had, period. That is the simplest way to describe this thing. So not only does it have access to pretty much all of the Raichu stuff, Fake Out, Nuzzle, Helping Hand, all that great stuff, you also get access to a lot of the elemental punches. You get access to close combat. You get access to Revival Blessing, which is really, really good at just prolonging the game and getting you more incremental advantages overall. Not to mention the fact that your coverage is all over the place in terms of like you have fairy coverage, grass coverage, ice, fire, fighting. I believe you have access to facade as well, so there's an option there. You can fling stuff. There's a lot that you can do. I think yeah, you have access to Rock Tomb as well, which is really, really good. Low sweep for speed control. You have access to dig if you're really interested in that. Like, there's not a lot to hate about Pawmot. Not to mention the fact that Pawmot with Double Shock can OHKO most of the time. 252 HP, 252 defense, positive nature there. Murkrow. That Murkrow isn't the craziest, bulkiest thing in the world, but most Pokemon can't OHKO it with a super effective hit. Pawmot can. And not only do you get to do that, you get to essentially drop your electric typing in front of Garchomp, and now you're no longer weak to that Earthquake, which is huge. On top of that, if you're Terra Electric, you get to Double Shock for infinity, because you can't lose your electric typing due to Terra, the way Terrestrialization works. And this essentially makes you no downside to Double Shock. It is just a base 120. I'm going to hit you. What are you going to do about it? And those are like my top like 5 or 6. I could go on and on about other Pokemon I think that are really good right now that aren't seeing as much play as they should. Things that come to mind is like Quaquaval. That Moxie Aqua Step set is starting to trend upwards. Definitely be on the eyes and look out for that. A couple other like real powerful ones come to mind, like Dragonite. I think Terra normal Dragonite's still really good. I think Moxie Gyarados is going to start trending upwards as we start to see more of these fires and flying and like fire and grass types pop up. Things like Gyarados are going to start to probably play like Terra Flying just to kind of beat up these things and kind of snowball the game that way. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is there a Pokemon that I didn't talk about that you want to see me talk about? I'm super interested in all that stuff. Again, thanks for watching the end of the video. If you made it this far, make sure to do all that fun YouTube stuff for us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive. Bye, everyone.